This third meeting of the forum is particularly special because we'll be sharing with you launching the transition pathway for the construction ecosystem. We'll be sharing a link for that final document with you later today in this event. But before we do dive into the event, I have a few housekeeping rules to share with you. So the first is that please remember that this event is recorded. And of course, we very much invite your comments and your questions and your input, but please share those with us in the chat instead of raising your virtual hand. And with that, I'd like to now introduce to you Katharina Knapton-Wielich, who is the head of unit at DG GROW, Unit H1 of the European Commission. And she'll be chairing this session with you today. So thank you all. I hope you enjoy your presentations, and over to you, Katharina.
Thank you very much for handing the floor to us. We're very happy to have the third meeting of the High-Level Construction Forum today, because, as already mentioned, the High-Level Construction Forum is really the major tool of communication, exchange, and co-creation with all the actors of the construction ecosystem. And what we are celebrating today is our major opus on co-created with all of you, the transition pathway for the construction industry that should be our guiding star, our roadmap for the next years of policy making, of successfully making the construction ecosystem fit for 55 and the other challenges of the next years, if not the next decade. So I really want to thank all of you for the contribution you've made in the path to the publication of the pathway that's to be published today during that meeting, which will present the pathway in all its detail, encourage you to disseminate the transition pathway, and to encourage all your stakeholders to add pledges and commitments to all those pledges and commitments for actions that the transition pathway already contains. And before we dive deep into the content, I'm extremely happy and proud to welcome our Director General, Kerstin Jorna, to make some introductory statements to us, putting also the transition pathway in the wider frame of the policies of DG GROW at the moment.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and the whole team. And thank you very much also for inviting me at this forum, ladies and gentlemen. To start off, I'd like to share some impression with you I took away from Munich last week when I attended the International Crafts Fair. And so I met a little startup that produces a robot that can paint all the walls at night in new buildings. I also met another bigger company that builds robots that can drill holes overnight in new construction and can actually take away very heavy work. And at the same fair, I also met a company who was successful because they were only using wood from the region, treated in a particular way to create a new type of facade. So innovation and ideas to address the challenges of the construction sector, very broad range, was very, very visible. And when you look at the construction sector, it's really at the heart. The ecosystem is at the heart of the challenges that we have with a green transition. In terms of, for example, waste, construction ecosystem is the biggest generator of waste in the EU, 37% of all. Taken as a whole, everything together, EU buildings are the biggest user of energy, 40% of our total energy consumption. And 75% of the buildings as they are today in Europe are inefficient when it comes to energy. And only yesterday you saw that the Parliament adopted its opinion on the proposed directive on energy efficiency on the performance of buildings with very ambitious goals. So I think the future is bright for the construction ecosystem, but we will also need new solutions. And this is very true for the construction ecosystem, but true for all the industrial ecosystems in the EU. The other day, I met a group of Finnish entrepreneurs, and when I asked them, what's, on your business case, what if you had one word to characterize it, a lot of them said uncertainty or fog. You don't quite clearly see the future. Everything is changing. So this is why we developed the idea of transition pathways, because transition pathways are a way to lift the fog, to have the whole ecosystem, help them understand where we want to be in 2030, where, investments are needed, where skills are needed, how the whole business case could work, where technology could provide a solution. And rather than having everybody in, their corner, for example, the startup with a painting robot explained that it was very difficult to actually convince people to buy the robot because it was difficult to demonstrate that it would work. So there is, and others were struggling with access to finance, sufficient demand. So there was an overall feeling I'm alone in my corner fighting it. And this is what we want to change with the transition pathway. Our colleagues have certainly told you that we have transition pathways for other ecosystems already, tourism, which was one of the first, social economy. We have a very successful transition pathway on chemical industry, which has already been replicated in 15 member states through also transitional pathways, which can then help more in a more granular way to see the broader picture of the business case. What I retain very much from the discussions at the crafts fair with different companies is also the skills argument. So for these new technologies and this new way of building, there are shortages in skills. One company reported that, they're very much into solar rooftop solutions, that it was very difficult to find people to actually install the rooftops because you need to be a bit of an electrician and you need a bit of a, I don't know how you call this word, somebody who covers the roofs, couvreur. And they were not finding the right skills. This is again where we are trying with the work that we are doing in the transition pathways and that you have included in your transition pathway as well, to see how we can teach people, help people to upgrade their skills, not by doing and learning a whole new profession, but just the skills they need, and how we can also organize portability once workers have invested in these skills, how they can take them across Europe, because a number of companies with very innovative ideas, in particular in this kind of solar rooftops field, they supply clients in the whole of Europe or in many markets, and then they want to send their engineer or their worker to different markets, but that proves to be very difficult. So it's also to facilitate this. And the transition pathways, they create, they lift the fog for investment decisions, for new business models, and also for individuals to decide to invest in new skills for themselves. I understand that there are already a lot of pledges that are being prepared on the transition pathway that you are preparing, and I can say from the tourism transition pathway that the pledges in themselves give new certainty because if I know somebody else can do it, I can also do it. Or if somebody else does one thing in a region, it makes sense that I do another thing in that same region when it comes to, for example, in the tourism sector, between catering, hotel, and event organization. So again, it's about creating this investment security for new business models and for new work. What I see in the construction ecosystem, the market is not missing. What is actually missing is new ideas about how to build and how to use sustainable materials, recyclable materials, less CO2 intensive materials in the building process, and also how to use new technologies, sensor driven, to make these buildings more efficient, and have people also being able to monitor and maintain these systems, and investment. You also need market. You need the owners of building being able to finance adapting the buildings, introducing new technologies, and all of this may seem very, very broad and very confusing, but the transition pathway is really the polar star in the ecosystem, and I hope that it will work as a polar star also in the construction ecosystem. And with this, I'd like to give back to Katharina, and I wish you very fruitful discussions, and I'm looking forward to see the different pledges, how they will combine and help each other, and how this will also make the construction ecosystem one of the ecosystems like chemical or tourism in particular, to emerge quickly and grasp the opportunities that are in this green and digital transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kerstin, on behalf of the colleagues sitting here, the colleagues listening, and obviously all the participants. That's been a very inspiring and very forward-looking and very diverse speech. We will work together to get from uncertainty to some clarity, if not certainty. We will have a big job in front of us with the lighthouse projects we agreed with now, that they will be rolled out across the European Union by replicating what the first forerunners will do or have already done. But let's dive a bit deeper into the content. As you know, the transition pathway link will be shared after those presentations. So you have, to a certain extent, still the very exclusive sneak preview of the final version of the transition pathway, which will be presented by my wonderful and expert colleagues, Philippe Mosley, Roman Howard, and Peter Starlins, for the respective parts they were most responsible for, but the whole thing has also internally been a great process of co-creation and cooperation. And with this, I hand over to the colleagues to give you more details on what we've done.
Thank you, Katharina. My name is Philippe Mosley. I'm going to start taking you through these slides of what's in the transition pathway, and then I'll be handing over to my colleagues Peter and Roman for the respective areas. If we can maybe get the first slides up of the transition pathway. We're going to be describing to you, first of all, how we got here, the process that we went through together with the High Level Construction Forum, and also go through everything of what's in the document, and then it will go online, as Katharina said, during the break. We can have the next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we are. Thanks. So the construction ecosystem is actually the second largest of the 14 identified in the industrial strategy. So you can see the figures there that were published in the single market reports. It's absolutely dominated by SMEs and even micro enterprises, as we know, and that is one of the things that is always at the forefront of our minds. Next, please. Now, the construction ecosystem doesn't exist alone. Among the 14, we've actually identified that 8 others are related to construction. And if we can maybe bring up the text on the slide as well. That there is some, yes, thank you. So you can see there the other ecosystems. We have, for example, there the cultural and creative ecosystem gives design services. We have the energy intensive industries, which produces the materials used for construction products, especially, of course, things like cement and steel and glass and so on, which are fundamental. We have the digital ecosystem with electronics and services and so on. We have the agri-food ecosystem with some materials and resources for construction. We have also the mobility and transport ecosystem, of course. Construction provides infrastructure for those. We have the renewable energy sources that go on to buildings. So manufacturing of those, things like solar panels and so on, are made in that ecosystem. And then we also have the proximity and social economy and civil society ecosystem. And there, particularly for affordable housing, and the Affordable Housing Initiative is under that one. Next slide, please. The High Level Construction Forum, of which this is the 3rd meeting, is our main platform to communicate with the stakeholders and the member states. So we now have over, in fact, well over almost 800 stakeholders registered now for the forum. And this is the mechanism we've been using to co-create the transition pathway. We've been holding 1 to 2 plenary meetings per year, like this one, but also we have thematic meetings on points that the forum itself decides are its priority areas to discuss. And then we also have the regular newsletter, which you will all receive as members of the forum. Next slide, please. Now, in the process of developing this transition pathway, it all began with the updated industrial strategy, which set out the need to develop transition pathways back in 2021. And we held the first high-level construction forum shortly after that. And also we held several of these thematic cluster meetings. And that work and all those conversations resulted in the staff working document that we published in December 2021 that set out the scenarios for the transition. And that was then open for public consultation. And we received well over 100 detailed written responses to that. We also presented the staff working document at the industry days. It was presented at the council working group on harmonized standards. Also at the New European Bauhaus, it was presented to that community and various other events. And almost exactly a year ago, the consultation closed. And then moving on, we have been preparing now. We had a second high-level construction forum where the responses from the consultation were presented. We had further co-creation meetings on the various themes of digital, green and resilience. And now when we've been preparing the final transition pathway, we've also had input from the various commission services, culminating today in the publication of the transition pathway documents. Next. Now the document is structured in this way with 6 building blocks, as we call them, the main chapters of the document, which go there from left to right. This follows a blueprint that was given to us by the Industrial Forum. And so all of the transition pathways are structured in a similar way. So we start with the competitiveness of the ecosystem. We look at the need for skilled labour and all of the policies and measures for that. We then look at the enabling framework, and what that means is not only the policy framework, but also the necessary infrastructure, both physical and digital infrastructure. Then we look at finance and research and innovation. And finally, we have a chapter on the safe and fair built environment. And next slide, please. And so now we're going to take you through, I mean, all that process that I just described is contained. There's an introduction to the document that describes the process. And now the actual contents of the document. We'll take you one by one through these 6 building blocks with my colleagues here. And I'll pass over, before we start on the first one, the next slide, please. There's just an important aspect of this document is that it contains in each of these building blocks tables like this one of recommendations for action. And there's a series of them. These actions are ones that would deliver a green and digital transition and improve the resilience of the ecosystem. They're not just actions, recommendations coming from the Commission. They are actually ones that were suggested by you, by the forum, in the responses to the public consultations and in the high-level construction forum events on the various themes. So there's been really a bottom-up process of co-creation for these actions. Each action comes with a recommended actors, either EU member states or industry, or sometimes 2 or all 3 of those who should deliver that action. And then also there's a suggested time frame, which is short, medium, or long term. So just to stress that these are recommendations, not commitments to action from the Commission. Next slide, please. And now I think we'll pass over to my colleague, Peter, who will take us through the first building block.
Thank you, Philippe, and a very good morning to all of you. Indeed, my name is Peter Stalens. I first talk a little bit about this first building block, indeed, about competitiveness. In this building block, we are describing the construction ecosystem and all its critical factors affecting its competitiveness. It has been stated already how important the construction ecosystem is relatively within the whole EU economy, employing around 25 million people and providing almost 10% of the EU total added value. And of course, as many ecosystems do, the construction ecosystem knows a lot of challenges, which also gives rise to a lot of opportunities. For example, the ecosystem is labor intensive and currently lacking talent due to aging workers, due to difficulties in attracting young workers. So the demand for new skills and roles to carry out the green and digital transition is rising and could be an opportunity for the ecosystem's future. Also, construction represents the biggest source of Europe's waste, with almost 37% of total generated in 2020 by mass. So also here, a huge task lies ahead, also to decarbonize the construction sector. And in terms of digitalization, construction bears still the negative reputation of a slow adopter of technology and innovation. But at the same time, the way we build, manage, and intervene in the built environment is being transformed with numerous applications. Many of them we go into more detail in the document. So also what we described in this building block on competitiveness is the many crises that have been challenging the construction ecosystem since 2020, and that in fact never stopped since. So we've had 2 years of pandemic with a huge impact on the whole ecosystem, where of course the ecosystem has shown tremendous resilience by moving very quickly towards average output levels above pre-pandemic levels. But the resilience test for the ecosystem was not over yet after the pandemic, with Russia's unexpected invasion of Ukraine having a very strong direct and indirect impact, with supply chain disruptions, with extremely volatile prices of construction materials, rising energy prices, and so on, which is the fog that has been mentioned already by our Director General, and which gave many difficulties. So it is indeed very important to try and lift this fog for the construction ecosystem. And then again, the construction ecosystem has once again shown its strength with continued good output and productivity figures in 2022, and even relatively positive outlooks for 2023. But yet it's quite clear that in this competitive and multipolar world, the European construction industry cannot be naive and must be aware of its dependencies and dependencies on third countries in its many value chains. And what has been mentioned before too is that the European construction ecosystem is not a standalone ecosystem. On the contrary, it is connected on many levels. As Philippe already mentioned, it is connected to many other ecosystems, energy-intensive industries, to name a very important one, but also, of course, wholesale and retail, mobility transport ecosystem, the digital ecosystem, of course, energy renewables, social economy, proximity, creative industries, and so forth. It's also connected within the world with international markets, international value chains, increasing presence of foreign companies in EU markets, and an increasing need for many EU companies to be present on international markets to stay competitive, while many thresholds to do so still remain. And of course, the ecosystem is also connected through many networks, supporting and accelerating growth and competitiveness, such as Europe Enterprise Network, European Cluster Collaboration Platform, Euroclusters, EU BIM Task Group, a Big Buyers Community, digital innovation hubs, and so on, all bringing together many of the construction-related industrial associations. The last point here in terms of competitiveness is the fact that it's also very good to see the many tech startups looking at the construction industry, very often digitalizing the industry from the outside, bringing important innovations into the ecosystem, bringing a lot of value economically in terms of productivity gains, but also societal added value in terms of accelerating the greening of the sector. So the list of actions to be taken by the EU, the member states, and the industry in this building block has many concrete goals. It is about ensuring a level playing field on the EU markets. It is about increasing the number of startups, about accelerating the development of technologies. It is about creating resilient value chains, about improving public procurement. It is also about enhancing international standardization and promoting the use of harmonized standards, and about supporting initiatives in the field of architecture and sustainable use of materials.
So with that comprehensive overview of a building block 2, I'll hand over to Roman on the next building block, skills and talents. Obviously, our Director General also mentioned it. It's absolutely key for the success of the construction ecosystem. But over to Roman.
Thank you very much. My name is Roman Horvat. I am part of the construction team, and now I will speak about skills and talents. Skills are crucial for the resilience and productivity of the ecosystem and the sustainability of the built environment. The transition of the construction ecosystem is impossible without adequately prepared workforce. And for such a workforce, it's expected that we should provide more, better, and safer jobs. So we should persuade the current and prospective workers and talents that, as we have heard, that the future is bright. But unfortunately, often there is some feeling of uncertainty because ecosystem suffers overall from a poor image, low uptake of innovation, and low productivity. Those factors often overshadow creative and technological construction-related profiles that could be attractive to talent. Upskill and reskill construction workforce in such a big quantity, 25 million workers, is a really immense task. And it is not being supported by the fact that the construction ecosystem is very fragmented, and there is certainly division of powers and abilities of various players. So definitely to move forward in this area, we need to cooperate and create partnerships. So coordinated effort to upskill and reskill construction professional is a must. Because we need to provide to construction workforce and new entrants, lifelong learning and digital working practices, better working conditions, social protection, healthier and safer working environment. In this regard, as I said, there are various powers and abilities of stakeholders. So regarding the Commission is providing various means, incentives for the construction ecosystem via resilience and recovery facility and cohesion policy, for which construction ecosystem will be a principal enabler regarding greening of the European economy. And those means should be used also for reskilling, upskilling construction workforce, because there is a mutual goal. Properly skilled workforce will be able to deliver targets and aims of those facilities regarding means, as I said, recovery and resilience and cohesion policy. Commission is also providing funding for pilot training via the Erasmus Plus funding and Build Up Skills initiative funded from the LIFE program. So those pilot upskilling modules should be further disseminated in a mass scale via means provided by the Commission to member states. And those means should be used, as I said, for further greening of our built environment to fulfill our target to be climate neutral by 2050. Also, there are some other initiatives which are facilitating our partnership creation, like Pact for Skills. We would definitely like to invite you to report about your activities. Many of you are active in this area and doing very valuable, let's say, activities in this area, and those activities should be present. You should be vocal about them and to present to wide public that the construction really is having a bright future. Regarding lack of labor force, we should also look at various other sources. The construction ecosystem is very much male dominant ecosystem. So we should make some effort to attract women and perhaps also migrants. There are various initiatives across member states and stakeholders which are already active in this area, and those should be further scaled up. So to conclude, we need to work together, we need to cooperate, we need to create partnerships to pool resources and our effort, because talent, the pool of talent is shrinking and we are competing with other ecosystems. So we need to make a really common effort to get a fair share of labor force and young talent. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Indeed, talent is key. And obviously also getting the other half of the population into the construction ecosystem. That's obviously very close to my heart. But equally close to my heart is the enabling framework, which will now be presented by Philippe.
Thank you, Katarina. I think when we talk about enabling framework, as I said, it's the regulatory and policy framework and also the necessary infrastructure, including digital infrastructure. And it's also worth reminding ourselves here that building regulations are a national competency. So there's really a lot that member states can do there with building regulations. Not surprisingly, a major part of the green transition here belongs dedicated to the construction products regulation, which is under provision at the moment. And that's really key to move forward on the circular economy and also to stimulate production of innovative products and the use of secondary materials in construction. So the transition pathway goes into some detail about all of that. There's also a section in here on renovation of buildings, again, not surprisingly, because it's probably the biggest practical challenge facing construction over the next years, doubling or even faster the rate of renovation of buildings. And as we saw, as our Director General mentioned yesterday, the vote in Parliament. So there'll be negotiations starting in future on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. But we also have the renovation wave strategy there. Then there's also a section on the life cycle emissions, which we know was a high priority for the High Level Construction Forum. We have under development the roadmap to reduce life cycle emissions in construction for buildings by 2050, which the Commission is developing right now. We also have a number of national roadmaps, and we have a lot of industry roadmaps to decarbonize. So that is a key area. And then we also have a section on construction sites themselves. So we have seen increasingly in Europe zero emission construction sites, but also construction sites use resources like water and waste is generated also. Just to give you two specific examples of the recommendations for action in this section under the green transition. One is to prioritize renovation over demolition and reconstruction in policies, programs and developments. And another one is to support large-scale rollout of industrialized techniques for resource-efficient construction and renovation. And I'll pass over to my colleague Peter for the digital part of the enabling framework.
Thanks, Philippe. And indeed, in terms of digitalization, many opportunities lie ahead for the ecosystem to benefit from the possibilities that digitalization brings. There are many rapid evolutions in the industrial field and in the field of regulation right now, and they are all creating a leading framework for digitalization of the construction sector. And some examples being described in this building block are the Data Act as a framework to guarantee data security, privacy, and sustainable governance. Another example is the Artificial Intelligence Act, laying down harmonized rules for artificial intelligence, which has high potential, of course, in the construction ecosystem. There's also the cybersecurity as a major concern for companies and especially SMEs to further digitalize. There's also the uptake of digital technologies by companies and increasingly SMEs, such as BIM, drones, 3D printing, 3D scanning, sensoring, and so on, all of which are leading to carbon-efficient applications in construction, renovation, and facility management. And there's the many digitalization initiatives by public authorities in terms of procedures and public procurement, BIM and permit systems, digital building logbooks, and so on. So the list of actions to be taken by the Commission, member states, and industry in terms of digitalizing, it has many concrete goals. It is about supporting SMEs in their path towards further digitalization. It is about a digital framework for construction-related regulations, all of which are collecting construction and building-related data with interoperability between systems and with strong governance and guarantees, again, in the field of privacy and security. It is about harmonizing digitalization initiatives already happening at member state level, such as digital building logbooks. It is also about supporting further digitalization of public procurement and about supporting further digitalization of administration and all public construction related processes. And I'll be happy to hand the floor to Roman again.
Thank you very much, Peter. I would like to speak about the third point, which is creating a favorable environment. Still building block 3, creating a favorable environment for competitiveness and resilience. In this, we will speak about a regulatory environment. And as I said before, let's say the construction ecosystem is very much fragmented. So let's say it's consisted of micro and SMEs. And for them, administrative burden is very much crucial because they often do not have ability to cope with it. So when we are preparing any new legislation or adjusting or let's say adapting the existing legislation, we should always have this in mind that it should be really friendly, administratively friendly and regulatory friendly for SMEs in the construction sector. In this regard, I would like to speak also about the late payment, because late payment is a very much an issue for construction companies. In general, evidence shows that 1/4 bankruptcies in the union is based on payment on non-payment of invoices. So late payment is also, or non-payment is also a first major obstacle to the participation in public procurement for European SMEs. In that regard, the European Commission for the moment is preparing a revision of late payment directive. And if you would like to contribute to this, the revision, open public consultation is open till Friday this week. So your opinions are very welcome in this regard. Also, there are some other barriers regarding single market. I would like to speak about mobility of the workforce and also about provision of temporary cross-border services. Because often member states have in place various national requirements, various specific qualification and compliance with other conditions or such a compulsory membership of professional bodies which hamper, let's say, the mobility of workforce and the provision of services and doesn't allow to release full economic potential of construction companies. As we have heard, let's say in the morning, in the introductory speech of Madame Jorna, this might hamper also deployment of innovative solutions developed in one country to be, let's say, presented in other countries. So our effort in this regard should be on further facilitation of cross-border professional services and reducing administrative burdens regarding mobility of construction workers. And this is everything what I wanted to say.
Yes, so for us, the building block 3 is the traditional way of creating an enabling framework. We do not want a framework that makes things more difficult. All the contrary, we want to make things easier with the legal framework we develop together with member states and all other stakeholders. We already see questions in the chat as to specific legal proposals, which we will address later. I will now hand over to present the fourth building block on innovation, on which you have already seen the slide quite often. Over to Philippe.
Thank you, Katharina. Yes. So this building block, of course, looks at digital tools and their uses, and there are many of them, of course. Foremost in our minds is the fact that the ecosystem is fragmented and dominated by SMEs, and this affects the uptake of innovation. So we have issues of sometimes low awareness, low profit margins of businesses, and the cost of technology, meaning that sometimes investment in technology to improve productivity and to have other benefits is not as high as it could be. Where research and innovation can support the transition, we have quite a number of technologies that we discussed at the high-level construction forum, including robots, as our Director General mentioned, also 3D printing, collaboration tools, Earth observation tools for circular economy, including waste sorting and so on, and to improve productivity. We also have very recently the new European Research Area Roadmap for Circular Construction Technologies that makes specific recommendations for investment in research for circular technologies in construction. And we have a specific action recommendation in this building block to invest in line with that roadmap. Then, of course, we have the Horizon Europe programme, and in there we have the Cluster 4 part on the green and digital transition of construction. So we have topics in that, and then we also have the Built for People partnership in Cluster 5 of Horizon Europe. That partnership is on a sustainable built environment. And so we also have a specific recommended action to foster synergies between the different EU-funded and national programmes for construction research. Thank you.
And all this shows how all these building blocks are interlinked and partially overlapping, because we're now going over to funding, while Philippe has already mentioned some of the funding opportunities at EU level, but funding definitely doesn't mean only money out of the EU budget. Peter.
No, indeed, it is not. Thanks, Katharina. And in terms of finance and funding for the construction ecosystem, it is important to know that 90% of the companies in the ecosystem are not just SMEs, but are micro enterprises. So this means less working capital, higher perceived business risk, which in turn means that these companies have limited bargaining power for favor of financing deals. So many actions in this building block are linked to this situation. And furthermore, of course, many developments are going on in the private investment environment, where, of course, we have many players outside of the narrow construction ecosystem as we have defined it, where you have business owners, citizens, homeowners, public bodies without a necessarily strong focus on construction. So there we have, for example, the energy efficiency loans and mortgages that are growing in popularity, but there is still a need for a combination of public support and private finance to reach all ambitions as they are reflected in the proposals, for example, for a recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive and for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that has been mentioned a few times before in this meeting. Apart from this, EU funding schemes have still the ambition, of course, to support the construction ecosystem and the European businesses and its citizens involved. So examples here are the National Recovery and Resilience Plans, Social Climate Fund, also the recently published Green Deal Industrial Plan, where the text of the transition pathway goes into more detail on what exactly they mean for funding to the construction ecosystem. And in the meantime, of course, the EU regulatory framework has proven to be quite versatile in crisis situations, as shown and proven by the REPower EU initiative and the temporary crisis framework for state aid, for example, both supporting the construction ecosystem and especially its many value chains. So the actions in this building block center around a few very specific goals, which is to better link private funding with green and digital ambitions, to support the creation of the right criteria in terms of public funding towards the construction ecosystem, and to support SMEs in having access to finance and to reduce systemic barriers. And with this, I'd like to give the word back.
And that brings us to the last building block, to the way towards a fair and safe built environment. What does it mean in this respect, the fair housing and the safe buildings, Roman?
Thank you, Katarina. Construction policies directly affect the lives of Europeans, so also the availability and quality of housing and even the safety regarding buildings. So here we are speaking about affordability of housing because the recent greening efforts are, let's say, connected with the need of investments. And a lot of households are trapped because they do not have necessary means to invest to green their buildings or, let's say, properties. And then they have to face the rather high volatile prices of energy. So it leads to energy poverty. And this energy poverty, in 2020, the Commission published a recommendation on energy poverty, and also already member states in their national energy and climate plan are trying to address, let's say, this challenge to support such a household. We already have heard about the Lighthouse project of affordable housing initiative early today in the morning. And the Union is also providing support for this energy transition, like for example, by just transition mechanism to most affected regions. Regarding safety of the buildings, there are several strands which we can speak about. The first, which I would like to tackle, is asbestos in buildings. We know that asbestos is a rather not friendly material for human health, and it has been banned in the whole Union. So it was done by 1st January 25. But the construction products being used in the past are still could be used now until the end of their lifespan. So in many of current buildings existing, which were built during the period of the last century when the asbestos was widely used in construction ecosystem, they are still containing some asbestos. In September 2022, the Commission published a communication on asbestos-free future in which it summarized all current and planned initiatives regarding asbestos. And one of the principal one is a legislative proposal for monitoring, for screening and monitoring and registration of asbestos, and invitation to member states to develop their national asbestos removal strategies. The legislative proposal should be presented by the Commission this year. Another aspect is indoor air quality. Indoor air quality is one of the most essential parameters for a good indoor environment. In this regard, we are speaking about design of buildings, construction, and maintenance. So there are, it covers the whole lifespan of the building. In this regard, the Commission will present this year the document assessing pathways and policy options how to improve indoor air quality in buildings. And the third area is fire safety. Fire safety of the built environment is regulated by member states. But it's very vital that experience, knowledge, and best practices are shared across the Union. Therefore, the Commission has created a fire information exchange platform to achieve such an exchange across member states. Also, there are some other activities of the Commission focusing on improving data availability on building safety, and improving the safety of construction products through the revision of construction product regulation. Thank you very much.
So you all see a wide range, a wide arch of activities, from helping micro enterprises to ensuring safe housing for all of us via funding, innovation, and research. We are sure you have massive numbers of questions. The first, oh, wait.
We have the annexes to describe.
Well, we still want to describe the annexes very shortly. I'm sorry, I was looking at the time and thought, oh gosh, we are 3 minutes over the time. But no, the action roadmap still to Philippe, and then we go to all your questions.
Yes, it will be short. There are 2 annexes in the transition pathway. The first one is this one that visualizes the recommendations for action. So you can see here they are grouped into a total of 7 of these kinds of diagrams, which are color coded according to the key that you see there on the right, and they show the timing of each action over the short, medium, or long term, and so they're grouped together among those 7 themes. And on the next slide, we'll show you the Annex 2, which is all of the commitments that we received from you, from the High Level Construction Forum, from the industry, the different roadmaps that they've been developing, also national roadmaps and national strategies for construction, and all the other commitments that we received through the public consultation are listed in this annex. And also, it doesn't end here. We welcome more commitments to action in future in line with this transition pathway. And then on the last slide, which is the next one, there's our website there where you can see the whole process of the development of the transition pathway, and also the recordings of the High Level Construction Forum meetings and the reports of all those meetings for reference. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is only a big step in our wonderful work journey altogether. So also the implementation of the pathway, working on it, adapting it, changing it, will be up to all of you and us together. This is not a Bible developed by us. This is a handbook, a vision developed by all of us together. We will address some questions now in the time we have, and I hand over to Martin to moderate the questions and answers session. And we know that that's only the beginning of a wonderful journey working on the now published transition pathway.
Good morning. Many thanks, Katarina. It's a pleasure to be here back with so many familiar colleagues. And one of the particularities of these forum meetings is that when you look at the numbers of people attending, they grow and they grow and they grow. So it's really fantastic to see so many familiar faces, people, and it's a real community that has been growing. And perhaps looking at the chat, there are many, many questions indeed, which is fantastic. And there are some questions about what kind of animal, if I may say so, the transition pathway is, right? It's a unique type of document because there's a real element of co-creation. And Philippe, you mentioned clearly, indeed, that many stakeholders have been involved in actually the production of the document. So it's not only a commission document. There's also a question, is there an impact assessment? But it's not a document which, in my view, requires such a one. But it takes, of course, 2, or in this case, 3 to tango, right? Can you say, Philippe, a few things about the process and perhaps also some of the characteristics and even the ambition of the document in relation to some of the questions in the chat?
Yeah, as you say, there's no impact assessment as such. It's not a legislative proposal. It followed a process that was agreed with the Industrial Forum for all the transition pathways. So it has followed this co-creation process all the way along. So everything that is in there has come from all the feedback we've been receiving right from the beginning in all that process I described. So I think that was one of the most important aspects for us in developing this was making sure that we had heard all of the input, and that, you know, it's our job to put it together in then a coherent narrative and a coherent vision, and, you know, in the context of all of the other, not only the other transition pathways, but all the other policies, which are all listed in here, you know, all the policies that are relevant to construction. It's all together in one place.
And and I mean, this is a policy report. This is a forward-looking document. It is not the preparation of any concrete proposal that would need an impact assessment. Obviously, quite a few of the actions we are putting forward, we are thinking of developing further, may need impact assessments. Roman just mentioned the asbestos proposal, for which an impact assessment has been conducted, and that's
So late payment directive.
the late payment directive. The EPBD, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, is not really part of this pathway because it is now in the legislative process, but it's all part of the general picture of where we think we should go in the next years in the construction, for the construction ecosystem and with the construction ecosystem.
Absolutely, yes. And I think in the past, many stakeholders have always said, where does it all come together? You know, the fragmentation, and this seems to be really, I mean, a unique, let's say, umbrella document, if I may say so, that really puts all things together. So also the question about the ambition, referring to, you know, the recent statements of the UN Secretary General. So I guess, I mean, I would say also then, you know, the ambition of the document is as strong as the combination of the ambitions of the underlying individual documents, right? But perhaps another question, as there are so many, to Peter, right? I mean, when we heard Kerstin's opening remarks, and we always, when we listen to the importance of the construction sectors, the numbers are always, let's say, mind-boggling, right? So there's a question in the chat as is there an initiative, an idea to actually put even more flesh on those numbers? Because the importance of the construction sector seems to be known to people in the sector, but not always to the people outside, right? So in that context, and I think you referred to that, Peter, also, it's not only about construction in Europe, but also of the power and the potential, right, of this sector in even globally, right? So can you perhaps say a few words about, you know, the importance of the sector, and is it still possible to put more flesh on that? Thank you.
Yes, indeed, the construction sector is one of the most important ecosystems. We have provided some figures, some more figures, of course, are to be found in the document. And indeed, the figures on the employment and the value added of the construction sector may be often underestimated. So it is indeed maybe something for us to follow up on, to make sure that it is wider known how relatively important the construction ecosystem is within the whole European economy. And furthermore, I would also like to refer to the European Construction Sector Observatory, where we will be having a new contract rather soon, and where also many indicators and parameters of the construction sector, and specifically also the built environment, will be further monitored. So there will be quite some flesh on the bone there.
Yes, and of course, there's also always strong interest also in the construction products regulation and its power and its place in this document. I mean, Roman, you referred to that. You see also the questions in the chat on the construction product regulation. Could you perhaps say a few things also about that very important piece of regulation?
The construction regulation.
The construction product regulation. There's always a particular interest in the construction product regulation within the framework of this document, of course. Yeah.
Well, in general, for us, the construction product regulation is one of the cornerstones of an enabling framework, and of a framework that works towards the green, especially also the green transition of the construction industry, because for the first time, the construction product regulation contains at least one environmental requirement, the CO2 that has to be contained for each of the products. Most of you know that we are at the moment in negotiations, or that the Council and the Parliament are at the moment finding their position on the construction product regulation, where we see a lot of openness and a lot of wish to make that an ambitious regulation that will facilitate for all the construction for the construction ecosystem to market their products all across the EU, and to compete on quality, and especially also on environmental performance of construction products, which for the time being is not yet the case.
If I may add, in fact, it was quite hard to find the right place for this document, because CPR touches on so many building blocks. Of course, it has its main purpose of enhancing market compliance and conformity, but it also touches, as mentioned by Katarina, on greening the sector, and also has quite an important purpose on digitalization information on construction products, the conformity information, of course, but also the environmental information of construction products. So it touches upon many of the building blocks.
And the safety of buildings in the end. But that's a very good example of the whole of the transition pathway. You might sometimes wonder why an issue is treated in this building block and not in another, because it is also interlinked, and everything that you put linear in a document will only partially be capable of showing all these links.
So we need everything is linked together, and that is I think colleagues are waiting to hear, and I think shortly, the document will be made available. But before that, there are also more questions about the structure of the document, and indeed why certain things are there. Philip, you've been working on a long time on the green aspects, and there are questions also on the green aspect. Also, is a document really also as ambitious in that area as in others? And also, very interestingly, links with climate change, sea level rises. That's of course a huge impact also for the construction sector. Can you say a few more words about the positioning of, let's say, of these green elements in this broader sense, in the document and its ambition in that area?
Yeah, I think on the question of sea level rise and how that might affect cities and so on, that's really an urban planning kind of question that goes beyond construction per se. But more broadly on the green transition, I think that the ambition is what we've seen, from all the feedback we've received. We have in the annex all of the national measures that have been taken. And also the industry roadmaps. There's a great desire, I think, from the industry to invest for the green transition. So our job is to put the framework in place so that they're able to do that. And the whole point of the transition pathway is to get us all pulling in the same direction. So the recommendations for action they're not just for us, action for us. They're recommendations for member states and for industry action as well. And the whole principle is that we all have, we're going along the same line to get to the same goals in the end.
Absolutely. Yes, very good. Okay, great. And so many questions, so little time. Perhaps one or two just before wrapping up, Katarina, colleagues. Roman, always when we talk about the ambition and growth of the sector, people always say, well, it's the skills and the shortage of skills and people, right? And you rightly put there the emphasis on new groups of bringing in new people in the sector. So you refer to migrants and of course, to the female part of the labor force, which is huge. What about young people? Is the document also saying something about how to bring in young people into the sector? I'm just curious because I know you've been working on that topic also. For a while, Roman.
Yeah. This is the point that we definitely need to attract, as I said, new young talent. We are competing with also other ecosystem for those young talent because, let's say, the number is limited. The point is that, as I said, that there are some prejudices regarding the sector as, let's say, being not innovative enough, or let's say the working conditions are not sufficiently good. But definitely there are many various jobs which are very attractive regarding using high-tech technologies. So, and often it's not those young people who are deciding, but also they are being influenced by their parents with their experience. And they have experience for several decades, and they're seeing construction ecosystem as not being stable, as Kerstin said, that it's connected with certain uncertainty. But now we are, let's say, really focusing with our initiatives like Renovation Wave on greening of the built environment, and it provides a lot of opportunities. So as Kerstin said, the future is bright, and we need to persuade parents and young talent that it is really bright, and let's say construction sector, employment construction sector will provide some kind of stability for their working life and also ability to grow. Therefore, let's say when we are speaking about transition pathway, we are speaking about greening and digitalization. So you can imagine that like 100 years ago, nobody was able to work with a mobile phone. Let's say you would show somebody a mobile phone, nobody would understand what it's about. Now everybody is able to work with it. So like deployment of technologies is growing and people are able to adapt it. So definitely, let's say this, we should show that also construction ecosystem is active in this area. There are so many wonderful startups who are bringing new technologies and innovation to the ecosystem, and we should be vocal about that and trying to inform people that also construction ecosystem is being modernized. And it's, let's say, good working pathway for young talent. I'll say to inform also parents that their children should follow this path, working pathway, let's say, for their bright future.
We can marry construction with a smartphone. And that's where we hope to attract new and young talent.
Absolutely.
That mainly use their hands, possibly with their smartphones, and they will be able to do that also in construction to a great extent.
The chat, meanwhile, is filling, I think, faster than we can answer, and the time is coming to an end. I think it's a sign that people are very much looking forward to actually seeing the document, and I think also they'll probably answer quite a few questions. But also good to see that there are already questions about what's next, the implementation of the document. It's about the capacity of the document to coordinate the Commission and other actions. And I think that's exactly the subject of the part 2. I probably will go over that. So I think without further ado, over to you, Katarina, and I think we may have an opportunity to actually see the document. Thank you.
Well, yes. So I hope you have enjoyed that part, and we are very grateful for all your questions. So this is a debate. This is an ongoing debate. This is not a top-down exercise. This is an exercise I can only repeat and repeat it. That's an exercise we all go through together, and which we will obviously be adapting over the next months and years to be the most effective. I saw in the chat, shouldn't we embrace other technologies as well, except for 3D, besides 3D printing? But shouldn't we also look at low technology solutions that may have a less environmental impact? To all these, I can only say yes. And go now, have a coffee, do whatever you need in 10 minutes time, and be back at, Jan, please help me, when everybody is supposed to be back.
11:20.
At
11:20. 11:20. Yeah, 10 minutes.
So you have exactly 12 minutes. So we give you even 2 minutes more than on the slide to do what you like or have to do. We see you back then for the panel discussion. I hope you're all back. And full of energy after having had a coffee or at least some water for the second part. From co-creation to co-implementation, knowing very well that the creation process is never fully over. Now we have published a document, and this document will be our guiding star. But this doesn't mean that the star won't change shape over time when we're going for co-implementation. And here we will now stop presenting our pathway and pass to a panel discussion, for which we've been very lucky to have a group of distinguished panelists who represent different parts of the construction ecosystem. Each of you will make an opening statement, but allow me first to present all of you. There is first Piero Petrucco. He is the vice president of FIEC. So he will bring to that discussion the viewpoint of industry, of the construction industry as a whole. Second, we have Milena Freustel, whom I met when I was very new to the construction ecosystem, to which I'm actually still pretty new. She brings the perspective, especially of the BIM task group, who has the extremely valuable goal to make BIM way more mainstream than it is at the moment. And she can give some of the German perspectives on the development of the construction ecosystem. Then, and obviously, she also brings the female element, of which we generally don't have enough. Possibly that's the moment to mention that the most important female on our side, who most of you know, Elektra Papadaki, is not able to be with us today. She regrets that extremely and wishes all those she knows and all those she doesn't know a successful morning, and us together a successful co-implementation. And that brings me to Stephen. Stephen Richardson is the director of the World Green Building Council. You, Stephen, will bring the perspective of the Green Building Councils, making links with private investment, green project, sustainable finance. And Anders Lindholm, as Councillor for Education at the Swedish Permanent, will bring the Swedish perspective and a bit of the Council perspective with a clear focus on skills and talents. Now, over to you, Piero.
Thanks. Thanks to the DG Grow for allowing me to intervene today and to put forward our initial thoughts regarding the transition pathway for our ecosystem. I'm speaking, as was said before, on behalf of the FIEC, the European Construction Industry Federation, and not for the Construction 2050 Alliance, but I will also mention that we are planning to do it in the framework of the Alliance. FIEC represents construction companies of all sizes, from the small family companies to the large international groups, doing all types of construction activities, from renovation works with buildings to the large infrastructure projects. The EU priorities have clearly indicated us the targets to be achieved in the deadlines, the main one being a carbon-free Europe by 2050. It was therefore important to define a framework at the European level which should help us in defining our own transition pathways towards these targets at national and at company level, as well as for each of the participants in the construction process. The document we are talking about and that we have seen this morning is the result of a contribution of many actors, collects a lot of ideas, and analyzes the pathway transition from various points of view in a complete and exhaustive way, taking into consideration the many critical issues inherent in the process we intend to undertake. As an association of companies, here we would like to highlight some important aspects that emerge from a first reading of this document. One of the first important messages to underline is that construction is a complex process with many actors intervening. One of the main implications of the green and digital transition is the need for strengthening the cooperation along the supply chain. The long supply chain is something that characterizes our sector, and thus is very important when we are discussing about this kind of argument. This means that our respective transition pathways are closely linked and are dependent on the transition pathways of the other actors. We as companies are just the one that transform things, stuff that are coming from other actors. Just think about cement or steel, for example, and what this means in terms of CO2 emissions, whereby the importance of a common European reference net framework is evident. The second message is that the co-creation process, the close cooperation between the industry and the European Commission, was a key element that has allowed us to identify and define the main challenges and needs. But this transition pathway is just the starting point, as was said before. It now needs to be implemented by all the actors, taking into account their individual and also national specificities. And thus leads me to the last message that I would like to raise at this stage. The implementation of such a transition path would require some clear milestones, a monitoring system in order to assure a proper follow-up, and also a methodology, a framework for adapting it according to the needs and developments. From what we understood from the presentation, this is something that maybe has to be improved because it seems that is not enough defined and which would need to be addressed. As mentioned at the beginning, the transition pathway for our ecosystem cannot be implemented if each actor tries to do it on its own corner. We need to implement it in close cooperation. Thus, is why we will also discuss in the framework of the Construction 2050 Alliance, which gathers more than 50 actors of the construction process. And on that point, we have to say that we will have a meeting foreseen in March the 30th with DG GROW on this specific issue, and we will then discuss together about the next joint initiatives. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Piero. Milena, the floor is yours. And thank you also very much, Piero, for being even shorter than the 5 minutes you had. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to start with a short thank you for the report, which I think is a very comprehensive and well-structured product. It is a good analysis of the status quo, but it also has an outlook for further steps and initiatives. I particularly appreciate the bottom-up approach of the High-Level Construction Forum, which is really a very good foundation for a sustainable cooperation between public, private, stakeholders and the Commission. So yes, thank you very much, and I look forward to further cooperation and enhancing the transition pathway with some activities for which we can do together. So I want to say a few words about the role of the UBIM task group and our common agendas as a basis for further collaboration. As you may know, we have contributed throughout the whole high-level construction forum initiative, and we are very pleased with the outcome, in particular with the strong emphasis of the role of digitization for a sustainable transition of the EU construction market. As most of you know, our group consists of EU public clients and policymakers, and we see our mission in supporting the public clients responsible for the built environment to implement digital transformation in practice. As our name suggests, we use the acronym BIM, but not in the sense of building information modeling, rather in the sense of building information management, which we would like to harmonize throughout the EU, as we believe that this is one of the main vehicles for the green, circular and digital construction, and an important pillar of the EU single market. We heard about the meaning of the construction market today. So I really believe that we can contribute to all 7 high-level construction forum action roadmaps or action plans with this acronym, with this idea of building information management. First of all, to the competitiveness of the construction sector. As we know, Europe is not leading in this area, but if we put more effort and we catch up with other players, I'm sure we will become more competitive. I also believe building information management can attract and contribute to the upskilling of manpower, because as we heard earlier, of course, it's a matter of well, attracting young people and making this kind of work field more attractive. And this is going to happen through digitization, through innovation, through putting a focus on future opportunities. I think building information management also helps planning, assessing, and monitoring the green goals, of course, and promoting a greener environment. And I cannot say it's an instrument that can help us in all our fields, but it can contribute. It's a really good instrument, as we have experienced in our EU task group. Yes, well, one of the roadmaps is focusing on digitizing the EU construction. We can contribute on that with our knowledge, with our hands-on approach. And if we see the common agenda to deliver safe and affordable housing, I'm sure it will happen quicker and in a sustainable way through digitization. So all in all, we are really on your side, and we are very eager to contribute and collaborate with all stakeholders and the Commission, so we can make this transition really efficient. Thank you. My side.
Thank you very much, Milena, for your support and for your commitment in the past and for the future. I would like to hand over to Stephen to bring his perspective, especially of the Green Building Councils, to today's presentation and exchange. Please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to the colleagues at DG GROW. Would echo the words of others and just say we welcome this transition pathway document. I want to congratulate the team behind it. There are always real people behind these documents, and I know a lot of effort will have been put into that. So we thank you all for your contribution, and particularly for the consultation. It's great to see the Commission really sort of engage with the industry, and the extensive consultation is really welcomed. And I was pleased to hear a comment earlier about treating this as a kind of a living document. I think it's clear that one report alone cannot map out the entire transition, the full detail of what's needed. So I think it's great that we all approach this with that kind of mindset. Having said that, I think there's a few things that I'd like to highlight that we really are pleased to see in the report. We got early sight of it a few days ago, so we've had a chance to have a quick look through. very pleased to see recognition that there's more, that there's a need for more and clearer indicators on how the transition can be delivered and the changes needed, and that's something that we as a network are really keen to support. The industry needs clarity on what we're aiming for, and indicators around whether it's to do with whole life carbon or around circularity. Also wider issues around productivity and this kind of thing is really important. So we welcome that. Also, personally, I was very pleased to see the pillar on a safe and fair built environment, and seeing that addresses both the workforce, but also the perspective of residents and building owners. I think that's it's really important that we work together to ensure that this transition is a just one, because otherwise we will fail if we don't take people with us, if we don't address inequality in the transition. Then yeah, our aims will not hit their mark. So really pleased to see that, and I think there's more detail that could be added to that element. I've seen a few comments in the chat around how the kind of green transition is not explicitly sort of pulled out. I think it's kind of embedded in the pillars of the document, but I think that's a fair concern, that by not highlighting it, we maybe downplay its importance. So keen to work with the Commission and work with the wider industry on ensuring that sustainability is absolutely at the heart of everything that we're trying to achieve with the transition. And then a few other reflections. So I think it would be good to understand how this maps, or to more clearly understand how this maps onto specific legislative files, specific elements of the policy framework. Some of that is in the document, but I think more detail would be really great there. And I know a pathway is just that. It's not a concrete proposal from the Commission or a concrete commitment to anything in particular, but I think that's needed now. We need now to work together on understanding which of the what does the detail look like, and linked to that, I think greater clarity on the timeframes is going to be really important. It's nice to see the short, medium, and long term identified. But we need to understand better what that looks like, and we need to understand and work, collaboratively as a sector on what are the really key priorities that we need to focus on. We've seen the EPBD vote this week. That was a positive development. I think generally we're all pleased to have seen that been approved. But there are other policy tools and frameworks that need to be strengthened if this pathway is to be delivered, and it'd be great to see more clarity on that. Those are my initial responses, initial thoughts. There's no doubt lots more to be said and discussed, and I look forward to further questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. A very important point. Anders, I hand over to you, bringing your perspective and the one of the current presidency of the council. So we're very pleased and very honored to have you here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today. As you can understand, I'm rather new to this context, but I can see when you presented the challenges relating to skills and talents, I can definitely see that this is an ongoing discussion that affects almost all sectors of the economy, where the challenges are great, but of course, in your sector there are some specific preconditions that make it even more difficult. The fact that you have a very fragmented sector with a lot of SMEs, making sort of the need for taking a comprehensive approach and trying to find joint up solutions for attracting skills, and also for upskilling and reskilling even more evident. First off, I would just like to say that from the presidency side in the field of education, we have tried to highlight the needs of strengthening the work on green skills, because it's an area where we can really see that there is a lot of skills connected to the objectives of the green transition. There is not, it is less defined. There is less knowledge about what really needs to be done compared to the digital transition. When it comes to the digital transition, I think the industry and the education providers especially have a pretty good idea of what is needed. When it comes to the green transition and all the different upskilling and reskilling and new education that needs to be done, the skills mapping and the skills intelligence is a bit behind, really. A lot of things has been done. We've put this as a clear objective when we're discussing the European education area, the European skills agenda for sustainable competitiveness, the European Green Deal, and so on. But still, we still see that there is a need to highlight really renewed and strengthened efforts for skills intelligence, skills identification, a wider discussion between industry and education providers on how to adapt the education offers for tomorrow to the needs that arises from the green transition, and also, of course, attracting individuals to green transition sectors. And here I would also like to point to the European Year of Skills 2023, which will be hopefully adopted soon and will then run for the remaining part of the 2023 and the initial part of 2024. This we really hope that could be a good opportunity to highlight specific needs and specific skills shortages affecting sectors like the construction industry. So I really hope that part of what you can do to realize the transition pathway for construction could also be done through using the European Year of Skills, and to make events and organize roundtable discussions between industry and education providers, specifically towards the skills and the talents needed in the construction industry. So thank you very much from my side.
Thank you very much, Anders, for highlighting this extremely important, absolutely basic requirements for the construction ecosystem to develop and to transform all of us. Skills, young people 30 years younger than some of us, 20 years younger than others of us, will have to carry the flag of this transition. I would actually like to ask all of you, could you highlight, since you had sneak previews and you have worked in the co-creation process with us, can you already highlight some of the actions you're proposing really concretely within the pathway, or where the actions that we have proposed and that we have put in the document are actually already actions that you are taking? And could you tell us a bit about what you're doing and what you plan to do? I'm not sure that I want to do it in the same order again. Is there anybody who wants to volunteer to take the floor first? Otherwise, oh, Milena, thank you very much.
I'm happy to start answering this very good question. Well, the European Task Group has been working on a roadmap, as most of you might know, and we had our General Assembly recently, so we have adjusted our next steps, our next activities quite similar to what the High Level Construction Forum is suggesting. For example, we want to focus on public procurement and BIM, or Building Information Management, because we see this as the starting point for all projects. And if we manage to place BIM at the beginning, we really believe that this is going to become the standard for public projects. I know the private sector is using BIM quite good for a while, but we want to accelerate the process within the public sector as well. So we are planning to do 3 workshops, and we want to do a BIM for public procurement conference this year. So really hands-on approach. For example, how can we use Open BIM, which is quite important for public procurement. Open BIM meaning we want to make sure that all participants can share the information without the obligatory use of a proprietary software. Then we also want to focus on the so-called common data environment, which is the platform where all the information is being shared throughout the project and later on for facility management, which is also crucial for using this digital tool. And in November, I think we will do the last workshop on how BIM can be implemented in big organization on the logistics, which is also quite important. So as I said, public procurement, then giving hands-on support and discussing different ways throughout Europe and harmonizing the approach is going to be our support on that. In Germany, I think it's also quite important to say that we have a very ambitious goal with the so-called Climate Protection Act. The current government has committed itself to enhance not only the general political goals leading to a climate neutral country by 2045, but also within the building sector, we have some benchmarks. For example, the new building standard, it's so-called KfW 40, which is the efficiency of housing being built, and new houses or new houses being built by 2025 should only have 40% of the energy necessary coming from non-renewable sources, which is a very ambitious goal. We also will want to start reporting on embodied energy. So this government is going to make this possible and introduce digital building resources passports, which is the first step to recycling or to circularity within the construction sector. And of course, we have a focus on timber lightweight construction and raw material security, which is going to become essential because we need to have a strategy to ensure these materials will be available throughout the whole transition process. Yeah, just a few more words about Germany. As a leading BIM country, we have 2 roadmaps for the infrastructure and for the building construction sector, which have a slight difference on the velocity, but all in all, we are on track, and I think this is going to make public projects very efficient, and we will see the outcome of this strategy soon. Yes, a lot to do, but quite a few things we've done in the past, also on the European level. Published a handbook for introducing BIM. We've offered cost benefit analysis, how to estimate the individual advantages for using BIM according to the use cases the client has chosen. So many things to do, but also that there is a foundation both on European level and I think in Germany as well. So,
thank you very much, Milena, for this very concrete sort of report for Germany, but also what you do with the BIM task group because of the overwhelming importance of digitalization. Who wants to go next?
I can say something if you want.
Wonderful, yes.
but just few things. As an association, we have prepared last year a strategic vision, a paper to help our companies how to face the sustainability programs in the next years. And we outlined 10 objectives that construction companies are ready to commit. For example, how to develop and apply sustainable design guidelines, defining a sustainable supply chain and supply strategy in order to reduce the impact of on the environment of the whole supply chain, or offering targeted trainings for the workers. As single companies, most of our companies now, they already start to do things to cut greenhouse gas emissions. For example, there are a lot of examples of companies that started decarbonizing their vehicle fleet or use sustainable construction machinery. A lot of us, also if, as we have said before, most part of our companies are small companies, but start to use the BIM, or there are some experience with the 3D printing methods. So I think that our system is now ready to start. But again, as I said before, we are very worried because we need that all the system, all the environment recognize the additional cost of the green products. We are in the middle. If you want to build in an efficient and environment correct way, you have to use materials that are green, especially steel and cement, because they are responsible. They have more than 60% of the whole CO2 emissions are related with steel and cement, just to give you an idea. And so, in this, it's very important that in public procurement, this is recognized. Otherwise, I think that we will never achieve what we would like to achieve. In terms of skills and training, we have just finished a big EU project, Blueprint for Sectorial Skills, aiming and developing tools and framework for anticipating the new needs, needed skills. And we have also co-signed with the European Federation of Building and Woodworkers and with ABC, the European Builder Confederation, a pact for skills, with some commitments for upskilling and reskilling our workers, because as was said before, I think that the problem of skills, the problem of to find the right people and to training the young people to those new jobs is fundamental for our companies and for our future. So, as I said, we have started. I think that we need to work to both levels as an association and as single companies. And we need to help our companies to understand how it's important for their future to go in the direction of a sustainability. Now it's something that is clear that we have to do. But we need an help for all the environment in order to achieve the goals we put. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Also, a comprehensive overview of what the industry is already doing, what it plans to do. Anders, I hand over to you. You will have the last word on all these questions afterwards, Steve.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I'd just like to maybe highlight specific aspects, and that is that, of course, we talk about upskilling and reskilling in the same sentence, but they're a bit different. Upskilling is, of course, when you have a lot of experience and knowledge already, but you need to get the additional skills. And for the green transition, that's actually often what we see. We don't really see a need for a totally new set of skills, but rather that the people that are working in the industry and has the skills needed for many of the things they do, they need to upskill, and they need to get shorter training courses focusing on specifically the skills that they need. So we have launched from a year back the idea of micro credentials, which is shorter training modules that could be added on to each other and together creating a new profile. So that's one important aspect and one important initiative that has been done that I would think is especially well targeted for the people working in the construction industry. But here, of course, we go into the area of validation and accreditation, because once you have gone into the field of getting these smaller education offers or targeted education, you of course needs to get that validated. You need to be able to add them onto each other and to make sure that you as a skilled professional can also be recognized for the new skills that you have added to your profile. So this is a very important discussion, I think, that requires a lot of inter-industry discussions and also discussions and cooperation between the industry and the education providers. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. And from your side, what are you doing? What do you plan to do, Stephen?
Thank you. Yes. I think there was an important point made right at the beginning by Ms. Jonna. She noted that one of the reasons the transition pathway for the chemical industry has been so successful is that it has now been sort of transposed, if you like, down to the member state level. And we, the Green Building Council Network in Europe, have been essentially doing some of that work already. So through a project that we call Building Life, over the last 2 years, 10 green building councils have developed national roadmaps for the decarbonisation of the sector, so focusing particularly on the ecological transition, but that touches on a lot of the topics that this pathway document addresses. So some of that detail work has already been underway, and green building councils across Europe have been leading it. So we I think see an opportunity to align that work and to ensure that what our green building councils are leading at member state level aligns with what the Commission is proposing. That work has been, much as this pathway document has, is involved consultation with hundreds of stakeholders across the region. So a lot of work has gone into engaging with the industry to develop those roadmaps. And as part of that campaign, green building councils have also been developing new training capacity, new tools, new data to support the transition, and also putting forward proposals in the EU platform on sustainable finance for introducing circularity into the EU taxonomy. A key theme that comes through very clearly in this transition pathway document. So there's a lot of work that we have been doing. And one particular point to anticipate I think one of the themes that we wanted to discuss, which is what will the industry commit to now to support this transition? We co-lead the Built for People partnership with the Commission and with the European Construction Technology Platform, ECTP, where we're co-programming, where around 400 million, just under 400 million of EU funds under Horizon will be spent. We work on that work program collaboratively with the Commission and ECTP, hoping to leverage more than 400 million euros of private investment into research and innovation. Again, another core theme of this document. And so one of the things that we can commit to doing is to ensuring that our work program under Built for People and in the Nebula project, which supports Built for People to develop a network of innovation clusters, we can ensure that work program is aligned with this transition pathway document and make sure that we're really sort of addressing through that R&I funding and the private investment that it leverages, we're addressing the urgent challenges outlined in this document. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Stephen. We've also been scanning here around the table the comments that's been made in the chat. Since we are coming to an end of our allotted time, let me make a few comments on the comments that's been made. We've seen that people are posting in the chat to a great extent been positive, but there's also criticism, and that's absolutely normal, especially relatively early on. When will we finally stop talking, and when will we act? I think we've heard from the 4 panelists of the chat right now that they are acting. What I like personally, particularly in what Stephen said, is the chemicals pathway has been successful because it went down to the member states. And indeed, because it's everybody in the member states, in the communities, in each company that will have to do something, and we can nudge, we can enable, we can try to facilitate. And we don't know it all. So with this will be indeed a continuous process of adaptation. I have also, I mean, some of you, not many, may know that I have quite a long past in procurement policy. So I have been rather pleased by seeing all the comments and hearing the comments on the importance of procurement to modernize a construction and the difficulties that that poses as public authorities, somebody mentioned it in the chat, have a tendency to be conservative and not necessarily embrace new technologies right away. And that's where exactly the BIM task force is a very good hook, because that's exactly what they try to achieve, to bring more digitalization into public administrations. And we've also seen that the emphasis that's put also in the document on safety in general and fire safety and security of buildings is welcome, at least by those who posted in the chat. It's really been our aim to have a rounded document that covers many subjects, and therefore might at times look a bit like a shopping list, and might at times say, why don't you have a paragraph that's directly dealing with sustainability? Well, that's mainly because that has to underpin everything we do. There will be no construction policy that will not think about how to make construction and how to make the built environment sustainable in the next years, how this important sector contributes to us achieving our climate goals. This is not one point among several. This is really the overarching or the underlying, whichever you like, a principle that we will have to think about every single time. And we believe that comes through in the document, and we believe we can do go and implement that all with all of you together. While at the same time, well, I mentioned it before, adapting it. This is a living document. This is a pathway. It is not a description of the status quo, which we will file tomorrow and never look at again. It's the beginning of a wonderful journey together. I think with this, I would like to hand over to our professional facilitators. What else we should do then? Thanking you all for your participation, for your lively discussion in the chat. One of the advantages is that we have all your comments and can come back to you and be in touch with you, etc. One of the disadvantages is that you couldn't grab us at the coffee break and ask those questions personally and have answers immediately. But we all know how the world of networking has changed over the last years. So I would like to again thank all our panelists, thank the presenters with whom I work daily, and thank all of you to have listened and to have enriched the discussion with the points you put in the chat. Martin?
Perhaps thank you so much for putting this all together, and it's been a very, very interesting meeting. I think from my side, having listened very carefully, there's one message that comes to mind. It takes 3 to tango, because obviously what is unique about this document is that it is not only a Commission document, but also a document which binds together the member states here also represented through Anders, and of course, many, many stakeholders. And it means also that the document can have much more power if it is embraced and if people decide to act now together. Because, as was said by Kirsten, the more pledges, the more commitment there is from actors in the community and from member states and Commission altogether, the more certainty is there for others also to buy in and to go that path. So I think that's very important, and also it means, of course, as you said, it's not a blueprint. It's a living and evolving document. It's a direction, and in that sense, also good to see, what will be intermediate milestones. So when walking in the Swiss mountains or anywhere else, we have always directions. We have some signposts, and it would be good also to see, indeed, in going forward, whether with this forum, we can work on signposts and also gauge and monitor and then see how far we are from the top at particular moments in time. But I think the comment that probably was most powerful in the chat was, let's stop talking and let's go acting. So I think in that sense, no time to waste, and let's roll up our sleeves and get going. And thank you very much from our side as well.
Thanks everybody for participating today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.